Hey Chris, this is Dick. I'm back with the new 992 Turbo S, and I want to tell you and your SoCal autofocus viewers a little bit about the car, a little bit about the options. We'll do a little bit of driving scenes as well. It's new enough that I can't do a launch control yet. We'll come back and do that, but it's a fantastic car. A lot of people, are on Renlist, the Porsche forum, always asking about what should I do in terms of some of the options. So let me share a couple things with you that I did on this car. I wanted to pick up the black accent. So on these LED matrix headlights, I have the black surround, which is an option. The wheels, which I really liked, are a newer Porsche exclusive wheel. I think Porsche exclusive translates actually into English as we can charge more for it. Those are Pirelli P0 tires on it, which I really appreciate. A guy that I bought 3 Porsches from when I was living here in California before moving back east and now back here in California was to get the side skirts painted. Body color, it makes the car look as if it's a little bit lower. And then also I did the gloss black window surround rather than matte black. The glass sunroof, which is terrific. It's got a shade. You can have it fully open or just the shade pulled back. What you just heard was the door locking because I haven't been in the car, and since I unlocked it, so it's automatically locking. I have black here on the rear air intakes as well. Now, interesting thing about these new handles, I'm not really a big fan. Technically, when I walk up to it with the key in my pocket, you can see it popped out. And if I want to lock it, I just press on that, and it also, in that case, folds in the mirrors. In the back here, again, the spoiler's deployed because I was driving it in Sport Plus mode. And this has the clear lenses on the tail lights, which means the only time you see red is when they're when you're putting on the brakes or you have the your lights on. I left the Porsche emblem in chrome. Some people do it in black. I think it looks sort of muddled, but I did do the 911 Turbo S emblem in black instead of chrome. And then down below with the sport exhaust, you get these 2 really cool exhausts. This is sport exhaust in black, not silver. And it's very similar to the way they're doing the GT3, GT2 RS exhaust, which I think is cool. One of the things they've been talking about a lot is that Porsche decided to put a good dose of GT3 and their GT car program into this car, and I absolutely feel it. Even with the standard suspension, the ride is really taut, and I'll go over some of the differences in suspension and engine powertrains with you between this and the current generation of the GT3, the 992. it's the amazing thing about this car and the profile is, a friend of mine, Steve, who posts regularly on Renlist, had a 2012 Turbo S in GT Silver. And we met up and put the cars side by side, and it's amazing how similar they look. Definitely the same heritage, the same profile that started way back in 1963. Let's talk about the specs on this 992 Turbo S, and we can compare them with the 992 GT3. But first, it's worth mentioning that the new 992 GT3 has, for the first time on a road-going Porsche, a double wishbone suspension, unequal length control arms versus the struts and other 911s. And this gives not only more tautness, more control on the track, but also a better ride for people using the car as a daily driver. Now on this Turbo S, the drivetrain is an all-wheel drive 8-speed PDK. On the GT3, a rear-wheel drive 7-speed PDK. The 7-speed reduces weight and also complexity. Horsepower on this car, 640 at 6,750 RPM with a 7,200 RPM redline. 502 horsepower in the GT3 at 8,400 RPM with a 9,000 RPM redline. Torque, 590 in the Turbo S, available from 2,500 to 4,000 RPM. In the GT3, 346 pound-feet of torque at 6,100 RPM. The power-to-weight ratio in this car is an incredible 5.7 pounds per horsepower. In the GT3, it's 6.3 pounds per horsepower. And power per liter, 168.4 horsepower per liter in the Turbo S, 125.6 in the GT3. The engine's just over 3.7 liters in the Turbo S and 4 liters in the GT3. And what about the 0 to 60 times? Well, what Porsche publishes for this car is 2.6, but people are routinely getting 2.1, 2.3 when they're doing things like doing this in the sport mode with the power boost and all the aero bits retracted. 0 to 60 times in the GT3 typically it's posted as 3.2, but people are getting around 3 with PDK, around 3.5 without. And just by walking up closely, you can see the mirrors extended, the car is unlocked. It'll probably lock up again if I don't open the door. Here's an important thing too with these two cars is the weight difference. The difference in weight between a Turbo S like this, curb weight, and the GT3 is 472 pounds. This car weighs 3,636 pounds, the GT3 3,164 pounds. And that's the nimbleness that people want on the track. Even though people have tested this car against the GT3 on the track and the lap times are pretty similar. The reason is that what the GT3 might be able to make up in the corners, the Turbo S can claw back on the straightaway. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the car relocking. Except, interesting, it doesn't fold the mirrors. And German engineers or the lawyers at Porsche probably have figured out why that's the case. Couple interesting things too. Believe it or not, the gas mileage on this car is exactly the same as what it was on the 991.2 GT3. 15 city, 20 highway, overall combined 17. But the way most of us drive this car, we're probably getting a little less than 15. Here's another thing about this car, and I noticed this with the GT3. You know, the GT3 still has its 7-speed PDK. It has a low rear end, meaning high numerically ratio. So when I'd be out in that car doing about 60 miles an hour, it was turning over at about 3,000 RPM. Now, some people have said that's a distraction when you're going on a long trip with the car because they refer to it as maybe a drone that would get sort of annoying with time. Frankly, I sort of never minded that. But in this car, at 60 miles an hour with the 8-speed PDK and a lower numerically rear axle ratio, I can be turning only 1,400 RPM compared to about 3,000 with this car. So it's really a little bit of everything. I mean, it's a super powerhouse of a car, and unfortunately, I'm still in the break-in period, and I haven't had a chance to really enjoy the full potential. as somebody pointed out on Runlist, you know, when you're breaking this car in at 4,000 RPM even, which is, car feels like the engine's going to wind its way right out of the back of the car, it's only about 250 horsepower. And I think, you know, the way many of us drive, I could probably get a lot of the same thrills in a Volkswagen GTI. But this is a wonderful package, really well put together. I'll show you a few things on the inside too, and we can talk a little bit more about the car's details. Porsche will always find a way for a buyer to spend a little bit more money on their car. In this case, this is where the side mirrors project down an LED image of the logo on the ground as you're getting out of the car. Is it absolutely necessary? Does it make the car go faster, corner better? Not really, but it's just one of those things you gotta have. And I've always been a sucker for the lighted door sill guards with the car's emblem on it. And a couple of things that are nice on this car, it came with the Turbo S logo on the headrests of the 4 seats, and came one of the standard options is this black, which looks a little bit of gray in terms of the exposure here, but with chalk striping, which is nice. That's not an option. And it has carbon fiber weave for some of the trim, and then also on the center armrest, where I usually would get the emblem for the car, it has, I opted out for a Porsche crest. Let me show you a few of the other things inside here on the dash, and we'll also turn the key on and I can show you a few things about the display. Okay, we'll start the car now and bring this to life. Now the center gauge is, the RPM is still an analog gauge with a real needle, but the gauges to the left and to the right are purely digital. And I'll just thumb through some of these without a lot of description. You know, some of the people have commented quite accurately that if you're back here driving, you're not able to see the gauges on the far right, far left. But, you know, I've done worse than having to lean over and look at a gauge. So I'll go through some of the ones on the binnacle that's right to the right of the tachometer. The other ones can be set for your option, but then it's set and forget, whereas I can scroll through these. Sport Chrono, of course, G-Force. One thing that I can't show you here is because we're not driving, is the tire pressures, but then to the side of each pressure is a bar graph showing what the tire temperature is, which is useful for the track, or actually in any driving conditions, to see if these tires, which are really high performance summer tires, are warm enough so that you can prevent sliding, loss of traction, particularly in really cold weather. This shows the power curve, and you can see that you've got to be cranking up the RPM quite a bit to get to maximum horsepower. And then this shows what sport mode I'm in. It resets to normal whenever you restart it, but then there's a knob down here that does two things. It does allow you to select the drive mode with a twist, and that center button is Sport Boost, which gives you 20 seconds of additional torque boost. So one can just go through Sport, Sport Plus, Individual, which you can preset, and then this wet mode, which is something new. There are sensors that pick up sound inside the, I'll just go back over here, pick up sound sensors inside the wheel wells. If they hear rain splashing up, water splashing up, it will give you a warning that you should dial back the power, which this does in wet mode automatically. It'll tell you maybe you want to select wet mode. And it also can use a spoiler as a brake, which is pretty cool. And as we continue to go through here, we have the measurements of all the key operating parameters. Engine's not running, so oil pressure is 0. And then this also is showing some of the trip parameters as well. And then if we go over here, this is a preset as well, but this also, you can set, when the car is running, you can change the settings in this binnacle right here. What I will do, I'm just going to pause this a moment and then we'll open the sunroof as well. I'm going to start the car to do that. This iPhone 13 is pretty amazing in how it auto adjusts for exposure. And in fact, I could dial this down so that it would not be exposing this much, because as I look at this sunroof cover, this shade, it's pretty much black in color, not the gray color shown here. Now, there are a couple of things we can do with this, and I can give you, I guess, the full show here. One is that you can dial back the sunscreen. Get the leaves in focus. You can do the pop-up on the roof, or you can have the roof pull all the way back. And I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I had to actually practice this, because it's been a while since I did it. The one thing I wouldn't have to practice when we get around to do it, and I'll post a video on that at some point, is launch control. Launch control, by the way, is just hammer your foot onto the brake pedal, hold it, because there's a lot of torque to deal with, absolutely floor the accelerator past the detent. It'll bring the car in Sport Plus mode up to 5,000 RPM, in Sport mode to 4,000 RPM, but you can get that extra 1,000 by hitting this boost button down here, and then just pull your foot off the brake as fast as you can and hold on tight for a joy ride out to about 2.1 second run to 60. And it is breathtaking. I haven't done it in this car. Chris and I did it in the GT3, and of course I had done it in the 911 Turbo S. But it is phenomenal, and it's amazing what's built into these cars. Just a few things on the dash here, and I'll put these in here to the extent that Chris might want to include them. Obviously, this has a nav setting.
Guidance is not active.
And when I'm driving, by the way, I do get, in this binnacle over here, I get the speed limit, a really big sign, which is useful, especially in driving in an area I don't know too well.
Route guidance is not active.
Then there's media, the phone settings. In fact, I'll just flip it over here to Sport Plus. And I can hear the RPMs get up a little bit, and I can hear a little bit more noise. If I go down here, there's the climate functions, the apps, including Apple CarPlay, is available on this. This assist is really good. I mean, I think anybody getting a car nowadays, regardless of the brand, getting this park assist, which has this camera function, and you can actually, even though the car is pointing forward, I can push on the rear button, and I can also look out the back, and it's probably better graphics than you can actually see on the video here. But it's super helpful in parking in a tight spot. And then all the adjustments for sound and the devices that are collected, and then a whole bunch of settings. So it's pretty cool. And then there's Sport Chrono up here that, you know, is good for lap times. I used to use this even coming home from work, and I would use it just to see what my fastest time was, driving, of course, within the speed limit, but just maybe being a little bit more economical on turns. So that's a little bit of the inside of this Porsche 911 Turbo S. The front axle lift system raises the front of the car 1.57 inches, or about 44 millimeters, in 3 seconds. Takes about another 3 seconds to lower. It's great if you know you're going to be going up a driveway, or if you're approaching a speed bump. And the locations can be saved in GPS, so you don't have to activate with a button the next time you reach that spot. The front spoilers deploy automatically in Sport Plus mode, but they can be operated manually from the dashboard. And in the back, the same with the rear spoiler, which deploys automatically in Sport Plus, and again can be raised and lowered with a button on the screen on the Porsche management system. So why don't you come ride with me, and I'll tell you a little bit about this car. I'm currently in Sport mode. In fact, maybe I'll dial it up to Sport Plus. This will bring the spoilers up in the back, down in the front. I'm going to turn in here. into Sport Plus mode, it automatically not only lifts the spoiler in the back and drops the spoiler in the front, but it also brings in Sport Exhaust, which of course I already had on, and it also ups the suspension to a sport setting in what Porsche calls dynamic chassis control. A few things about just that's interesting. If you go on a Porsche website, you'll see that these cars have torque vectoring, dynamic engine mounts, the Porsche stability management system, which automatically reads the road in terms of, you know, is it smooth, is it bumpy, and accordingly it's going to make adjustments in the level of the suspension. We've got a red light here, so this car, the sound has been dialed up enormously compared to where it was in my 2015 Turbo S, and also it's approaching GT3 levels. As some of you viewers know, I had a GT3 before this, a 991.1, and I loved it. I went to this because it's a little bit more practical. But the people at Porsche decided to inject a little bit more GT influence in this car, and they've done a great job. It's powerful. You'll hear the specs in a minute. I'm going to pull over here because I'd like you to hear what this sounds like from the outside of this 911 Turbo S, 992 generation.